The city never truly slept, but at midnight, it exhaled into a different kind of rhythm. The glowing skyline stood like a crown of fire against the black velvet of the sky. And from the upper floors of the towering glass skyscraper, the streets below looked like threads of light stitched into silence. Cassandra Hale, known across financial circles as the iron-willed billionaire CEO of Hale Global, was not supposed to be there. Her staff believed she was still on her private jet, returning from a hostile takeover meeting in London. But after a flight filled with restless thoughts, and an ache that even champagne couldn't dull, she told her driver to take her straight to the office instead of her penthouse. Something inside her wouldn't let her go home. The black sedan pulled up to the deserted plaza of the building, its polished surface reflecting the moonlight. Cassandra stepped out, her sharp heels clicking against the marble. She wore no makeup now, only a dark tailored suit that seemed too heavy for her tired frame. The revolving doors greeted her with a whisper, and the empty lobby swallowed her whole. She had built this empire. Every wall, every chandelier, every detail of the glass and steel structure carried her vision. And yet, at that hour, with no staff bustling about and no investors to impress, the building felt alien, like she was trespassing inside her own kingdom. Her reflection followed her in the black marble walls of the elevator. Cold, composed, unreadable, that was how the world knew her. But as the numbers climbed, her steel mask cracked just enough for wariness to show. When the elevator doors slid open to the executive floor, silence greeted her. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that presses against your ears, heavy and watchful. She frowned. The offices should have been empty. She paid her people well, but she demanded results, not overnight martyrdom. And yet, a faint sound broke through the stillness. Not footsteps. Not vacuum cleaners, something softer, like the scratch of a pencil gliding over paper. Her heels echoed down the hallway as she moved toward her office, her instincts sharpening. Cassandra had learned to trust silence and sounds alike. In the corporate jungle, information was survival. And right now, the faint, steady rhythm of that scratching sound stirred both curiosity and suspicion in her chest. Her office door was ajar. She distinctly remembered locking it before leaving for London. Her pulse quickened. Cassandra pushed the door open with slow precision, expecting she didn't even know what, an intruder. A desperate employee stealing data. A reporter. But what she saw stopped her in her tracks. There, in the soft pool of light spilling from her desk lamp, sat the janitor, Mr. Ramos. She recognized him faintly. Gray hair, hunched shoulders, always keeping his head down when he pushed his cart of supplies. She had passed him in the corridors dozens of times without giving him more than a nod. But he wasn't cleaning. Her leather chair, the one only she sat in, was turned slightly, and he occupied it. On her desk were spread not cleaning supplies, but papers, sketches, and blueprints. His hand moved across the page with a pencil, precise and certain, as if the world outside that office did not exist. Cassandra froze in the doorway, hidden by the shadows, her breath caught in her chest. The janitor's face was illuminated by the lamp, furrowed in concentration. Eyes alight with something she hadn't expected to see at this hour in her building passion. He was drawing, designing, creating. And for the first time in years, Cassandra Hale, the woman who had stared down boards of directors, crushed rivals with a flick of her signature, and walked through storms without flinching, felt something she had forgotten how to feel. Surprise. And beneath it, something even more dangerous, wonder. Cassandra gripped the polished steel handle of the door, though she didn't push it open any further. Instead, she lingered in the shadows, watching. Her pulse was steady but her mind raced. The janitor, Mr. Ramos, didn't notice her presence. His movements were fluid, almost elegant. Nothing like the tired gait she'd observed when he pushed his cleaning cart down the corridors. His hands, weathered and calloused from years of labor, moved across the page with precision and confidence. Not random scribbles. Not idle doodles. Blueprints, the kind her engineers submitted for million-dollar projects. He was drawing lines with a ruler, adding notations in the margins. Sketching details so refined it looked as though they had been lifted from a professional drafting board. Her gaze flicked to the papers already stacked neatly to his side. Each one bore designs, bridges, energy grids. Sleek skyscrapers that looked more futuristic than anything her own team had ever dared present to her. Cassandra's breath caught. He leaned back for a moment, lifting his pencil to his lips as if in thought, and she caught the expression in his eyes. They weren't tired and defeated, as she had always assumed when passing him in the halls. No, they burned with something sharper, brighter: ambition, vision, hunger. A janitor shouldn't look like that. She felt the urge to step forward, to demand what in the world he thought he was doing in her office, sitting at her desk like he owned it. But something, an instinct, perhaps, rooted her in place. Instead of anger, curiosity tightened its grip around her chest. What if she interrupted too soon? So she watched. Minutes ticked by. Mr. Ramos worked with a quiet intensity, occasionally muttering to himself under his breath. His accent was faint, but the words were clear enough when she strained to hear. No too much weight on the south support beam, adjust here, balance with reinforced steel, yes, that's better, cleaner, stronger. He erased, redrew, adjusted. Each correction wasn't clumsy. It was decisive, efficient. The way her senior architects worked when they were at the height of their creativity. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a man lost in fantasies. This was someone who knew what he was doing. Her gaze swept the desk again, catching something she hadn't noticed at first: an old, battered leather folder, its edges frayed, its spine cracked. Papers stuffed inside bulged, threatening to spill out. She recognized the type, an architect's portfolio. Her heart gave a strange, reluctant thud. She had sat across polished tables from Ivy League graduates, decorated engineers, award-winning designers, yet here in her office at midnight, a janitor was producing work that rivaled, no, exceeded, most of what she'd seen. A wave of conflicting emotions surged through her. Violation. He was trespassing in her space. Suspicion. Was he stealing ideas? Gathering notes for some rival firm? But overriding them all was something she hated admitting, even to herself. Admiration. She couldn't look away. Finally, Mr. Ramos set his pencil down and exhaled, rubbing his forehead. He looked proud. As if, in that small moment, he wasn't a janitor at all, but a man who belonged in the highest echelons of innovation. Cassandra's fingers tightened on the door handle. Every instinct told her she should stop this. Confront him. Fire him. Call security, even. That was what her reputation demanded. The ruthless CEO who tolerated no breach of boundaries. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt that dangerous spark of curiosity she'd nearly forgotten. What if? What if this man wasn't just a janitor? What if he had been hiding brilliance all along? The thought unsettled her more than any corporate rival ever had. Because in that moment, Cassandra Hale realized she wasn't just looking at an employee breaking rules. She was staring at a secret she was never supposed to discover. Cassandra inhaled slowly, pressing herself deeper into the shadows of her office doorway. She had spent her life reading people. Boardroom liars, smooth-tongued investors, even competitors who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. But she had never seen anyone like this. The janitor's hand stilled, hovering over the paper. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back, and regarded his sketch with the quiet, measured satisfaction of someone who knew he had solved something. Not guessed, not hoped, solved. Her eyes darted across the spread of papers again. This time not just as an intruder into her space but as a CEO trained to assess the value of ideas. What she saw unsettled her deeply. The first sheet was a cross-section of a suspension bridge, but not like any she had seen before. The design eliminated several costly supports while increasing durability with a system of interwoven steel arcs. If it worked, and it looked like it would, the cost of construction would be cut nearly in half. The second paper made her breath catch. It was an energy grid, designed to funnel renewable energy from multiple sources, solar, wind, hydro, into a single efficient storage system. Her own team had spent months trying to integrate such a model without success. His sketch looked simple, elegant, achievable. She leaned in slightly, her pulse quickening. Page after page revealed ideas, innovations that could transform entire industries. A skyscraper whose structure adjusted with wind resistance. A water purification system that used gravity instead of expensive pumps. Solutions that weren't just theoretical, they were practical. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't stolen work. This wasn't fantasies, was brilliance. Cassandra had built her empire by recognizing talent before anyone else, and she knew, instinctively, that the man sitting at her desk wasn't doodling to pass time. He was designing answers to problems that billion-dollar corporations were desperate to solve. Her fingers curled at her sides. For once, she didn't know how to act. Should she step forward and confront him? Should she expose his tress and crush him before he became a liability? That would be the Cassandra Hale everyone expected. The ruthless, unflinching CEO who didn't tolerate weakness. But her heart hadn't beat this fast in years. Not during negotiations, not during mergers, not even when she signed her first billion-dollar deal. She was staring at something rare. Something that could not be explained away. A janitor who shouldn't have been in her chair. A man who should have been pushing a mop and emptying trash bins. Yet here he was, sketching solutions that her highly paid executives couldn't produce with her pride research teams. Her pride bristled, but beneath it bloomed a grudging, undeniable awe. As if sensing eyes upon him, Mr. Ramos paused. His pencil stilled, his shoulders stiffened. Slowly his gaze flicked toward the doorway. Cassandra's breath hitched. Their eyes met. For the first time, he realized he was not alone. His face drained of color. His mouth opened, then shut again, as though words betrayed him. He scrambled to gather the papers, stacking them in a messy pile, as if to erase the evidence of his trespass. Cassandra finally stepped into the room. Her heels striking the floor like the sound of judgment itself. Stop. The single word cut through the tension like glass shattering. Mr. Ramos froze, his trembling hands clutching the papers mid-motion. The CEO moved closer, each step deliberate, her eyes locked on him like a hawk closing in on prey. But inside her chest her thoughts spun wildly. What kind of man hides genius in the shadows? What kind of story lay buried beneath those wary eyes? When she reached the desk, she didn't look at him first. She looked at the papers. She picked up the top sheet, holding it to the light. You did this. Her voice was low, unreadable. His Adam's apple bobbed. Yes, ma'am. Her sharp gaze flicked up to meet his. And this one? She lifted another sheet, the energy grid. Yes. His voice cracked. He straightened a little though fear still trembled in his hands. They're mine. Cassandra held the page longer than necessary, her eyes tracing the lines, the annotations, the elegance of it. For years she had crushed presentations, shredded proposals, dismissed eager-eyed hopefuls. Yet in that midnight silence, standing in her own office, she couldn't bring herself to toss his work aside. Because she knew, she felt, that what she held wasn't the desperate fantasy of a bored janitor. It was genius. Pure, raw, unpolished genius. Her lips parted slightly, though she masked the crack in her composure quickly. She laid the papers back down, her hand lingering for a moment. And for the first time, Cassandra Hale, the woman who had everything, whispered a thought she hadn't dared in years. Maybe I've overlooked something extraordinary. The air in the office had shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It pulsed, charged with tension so thick it clung to the walls. Cassandra Hale stood tall, the glow of her desk lamp throwing sharp angles across her face. In her hand she still held one of the sketches, its lines crisp, its design elegant, undeniable. Across from her, the janitor, Mr. Ramos, sat frozen in her chair, shoulders hunched like a man awaiting execution. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to steady them by pressing his palms against his knees. The pile of blueprints lay between them on the desk, exposed, impossible to hide now. For a long unbearable moment, Cassandra said nothing. She let the weight of silence drag out, testing him. Watching how he would bear it. Finally, she spoke. You realize, she said slowly, her voice like ice against glass, that you are trespassing. Mr. Ramos swallowed hard. His throat worked as though every word would cost him dearly. I know, ma'am. You sat in my chair. You used my desk. You filled it with these. She tapped the papers with the edge of her perfectly manicured finger, as if this office belonged to you. His eyes darted downward. He looked ashamed like a schoolboy caught stealing chalk. But then, just as quickly, something flickered there, defiance, pride, maybe even dignity. I didn't mean disrespect. He said softly. I never touched anything of yours. I only used the space when no one was here. To work. Cassandra arched a brow. Work. You call this work? She lifted another paper, the energy grid that had unsettled her earlier, and studied it again. These are not doodles, Mr. Ramos. This is advanced engineering. Architecture. Solutions my own team has struggled with. Who taught you to do this? He hesitated. His jaw tightened, his eyes glistening as if old wounds were clawing their way back to the surface. When he finally answered, his voice was low, rough with memory. I used to be more than a janitor. Her eyes sharpened. Go on. He shifted uncomfortably in the chair, then rose, as though he couldn't bear to sit in it any longer. Standing, he looked smaller somehow, his uniform loose on his lean frame, his gray hair catching the lamplight. I was an engineer once, he admitted. Graduated top of my class. I designed projects in South America, bridges, schools, energy systems for villages that had nothing. I had a family, a wife, a little girl. His voice cracked, and for a moment he looked away, steadying himself. I thought I was building a future for them. Cassandra's eyes, sharp as razors, softened just slightly. She said nothing, letting him unravel. But then, he continued, his voice trembling. The company I worked for collapsed. Corruption, fraud at the top, and when the lawsuits came, they didn't care who was guilty or innocent. Everyone was ruined. My savings disappeared. My name worthless. No one wanted to hire a man tainted by scandal. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I lost everything. My wife, she left. Took my daughter. I don't blame her. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. I came here to the States, looking for a second chance. But all I found were locked doors. No one cared about my degree. No one wanted an old man with a ruined record. So I took the only job I could get. He gestured toward the cleaning supplies cart parked in the corner. This. Cassandra felt a tug in her chest she hadn't expected. He looked at her then. Meeting her gaze directly for the first time all night. His eyes weren't pleading. They weren't begging for pity. They burned, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, stubborn dignity. I clean floors to survive, he said. But I don't stop being who I am. I don't stop thinking, designing, dreaming. His hand brushed over the stack of sketches with reverence. These are all I have left of the man I once was. The man I still want to be. The words hung in the air, raw and naked. For the first time in years, Cassandra felt her throat tighten. She masked it quickly with a sharp inhale, straightening her posture. Her instinct screamed to guard herself, to retreat behind the steel armor she always wore. Vulnerability was weakness. And yet, there was something in his story that cut past her defenses. She knew ruin. She knew loss. She had clawed her way to the top of an empire built on ashes. Her father's company, destroyed by betrayal. Her childhood carved out by hunger and humiliation. Perhaps that was why she hadn't gone home tonight. Why she had come here, restless, seeking something she couldn't name. And now here it was, staring at her from across her desk in the form of a janitor who wasn't supposed to matter. Cassandra exhaled slowly, setting the paper down with care. She studied him, really studied him, and for the first time. She didn't see a janitor. She saw a man who had fallen and still refused to stop reaching for the sky. The silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower, gentler, though still carrying its edge. You risked everything, she said. Your job, your security, for this. She gestured to the blueprints. Why? Mr. Ramos's expression shifted, softening. Because dreams don't die, he whispered. Even if the world tells you they should. Her breath caught at the words. For a moment, the hard shell of Cassandra Hale cracked. And she wasn't a billionaire CEO. Wasn't the Iron Queen of a global empire. She was just a woman staring at a man who reminded her of herself. The room seemed to hold its breath. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, yet time itself felt suspended between two lives. One of a billionaire CEO, the other of a janitor with dreams hidden in shadows. Cassandra Hale stood behind her desk, her fingers grazing the edge of a blueprint, as though weighing its worth. Across from her, Mr. Ramos stood silently, shoulders squared despite the tremor in his hands. His confession still hung in the air. Raw and unpolished. You risked everything, she had said, and he had answered, because dreams don't die. Those words echoed in her mind like a bell that refused to stop ringing. She had heard countless pitches, proposals, and presentations. Every day men and women stood before her, rehearsed and polished, trying to impress her with numbers and promises. But never, never, had anyone said something so painfully human, so true. Cassandra's instinct was to retreat into the armor she always wore: skepticism, caution, ruthlessness. That armor had built her empire, had protected her when the world tried to strip her bare. But tonight, standing in her office at midnight, standing at a janitor who dared to dream, she felt that armor crack. She studied him again. The weary uniform, the lines carved by hardship across his face, the calluses on his hands. By every corporate measure, he was nobody. Disposable, replaceable. And yet his sketches, his vision, they were extraordinary. She couldn't deny it anymore. With deliberate slowness, Cassandra gathered the stack of papers. She flipped through them, one by one, not rushing, letting the silence stretch. Mr. Ramos shifted uneasily but didn't interrupt. Each design, each drawing, spoke of discipline, knowledge and genius no mop and bucket could contain. Finally, she set the papers down and lifted her eyes to him. "You know what happens if I report this?" she said, her tone calm, measured. "Trespassing. Misuse of company property. Immediate termination." His jaw clenched, but he nodded once. "I know. You'd lose your job. Whatever little stability you've managed to hold onto. It would be gone." Another nod. "Yes. Then why didn't you hide this from me?" she pressed, her voice sharpening. "Why confess? Why not lie?" For the first time, he straightened his spine fully, his gaze meeting hers without flinching. "Because I've already lost everything once. And if honesty costs me this job too, so be it. But at least I'll leave knowing I didn't deny who I am." The words struck her like a blow. Cassandra felt her throat tighten. She masked it with a slow breath, pacing a few steps toward the window. The city lights glittered far below, millions of people chasing millions of dreams. She remembered being one of them, hungry and desperate, scraping her way upward through a world that wanted her to stay invisible. Maybe that's why she hadn't gone home tonight. Maybe she had been searching for something to remind her why she fought so hard in the first place. And here it was. She turned back to him. The mask of the ruthless CEO still clung to her features, but her eyes betrayed something softer. "You said dreams don't die," she said quietly. "Perhaps you're right." She walked back to the desk, stacked the blueprints neatly, and pressed her palm on top of them. "These designs, they're not the work of a janitor. They're the work of an engineer. A visionary." He blinked, stunned. For the first time all night, hope flickered across his face. So fragile it looked as though a breath could shatter it. But Cassandra wasn't finished. "You don't belong behind a mop, Mr. Ramos," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You belong in a boardroom, at a drafting table, presenting to people who can bring this vision to life." His lips parted, but no sound came out. His hands trembled at his sides. Cassandra leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering, more personal now. "Tomorrow morning 9 o'clock I want you in the conference room. You'll present these ideas to my team of executives. If they laugh, I'll silence them. If they doubt, I'll remind them that I make the final decision." His eyes widened, disbelief flooding them. You mean?" "I mean," she cut in, her tone firm, "that you've earned the chance to prove yourself. And I don't waste potential when I see it." For a moment, the room was utterly still. Then, slowly, tears glistened in his eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. He pressed a hand to his mouth, turning slightly away, ashamed of the raw emotion spilling out. Cassandra's chest tightened again. She looked at him, not as an employer, not as a billionaire, but as a human being, and something shifted inside her. Something she hadn't felt in years. Compassion. She allowed herself the smallest smile, soft and fleeting. "Get some rest, Mr. Ramos. Tomorrow your life changes." He stared at her, eyes shining with gratitude, hope and disbelief. His voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper. Thank you, ma'am. You don't know what this means." Cassandra straightened, her steel mask sliding back into place. But her heart still beating faster than usual. She turned toward the window once more, gazing out at the city she had conquered. Perhaps tonight wasn't about her reclaiming control after all. Perhaps it was about giving someone else the chance she once prayed for. Behind her, Mr. Ramos carefully gathered his sketches, holding them like fragile treasure. His footsteps were light as he left the office, but his presence lingered like the echo of something profound. And when the door finally closed, Cassandra Hale let out a long breath, her reflection in the window looking back at her with unfamiliar eyes. For the first time in years, the iron-willed CEO didn't just feel powerful. She felt human. and deep inside, a whisper stirred dreams don't die.